Barbara asked me to come along with a few words today. I said, what would you like me to talk about? She said, well, just anything. So once, just not a couple of days after that, I heard a story about a couple that adopted a child, came from Germany actually, and they, beautiful child, healthy and all that sort of thing, doing all the right things as a baby. And then after he got to be one, he hadn't spoken, and he had two, and he still hadn't spoken, and three, and they started to get some advice and were pretty worried about it. They'd come to accept that this is perhaps what it was going to be like. So when he got to six, they thought, well, so be it, we'll have a big party. So they got all of his friends in and had all the bells and whistles, the balloons and all the activities, and they made him this beautiful big cake covered with chocolate and orange icing. And so the party went well, and they were out cleaning up in the kitchen, and the young fella came out and he looked up at them and he said, I didn't like the icing. And they were dumbfounded, they'd never heard him speak before. They said, you can talk? Yes. Why haven't you spoken before? He said, well, up to now, everything has been completely satisfactory.
That's very German. Very German.
So I don't have a German accent when he came out to baby. So it said to me, well, no good at talking unless you've got something to say. So I guess our family history, in brief, is that my father was in the forest industry in Marysville, which is when I came to life. He moved to Kilmore, opened the garage there, which is where the Kilmore East Road is now, it's gone. And he was the Vauxhall Bedford agent there, as a matter of fact, as amongst other things. And then opposite his workshop was Tokmar's Blacksmith forge, and which is now a Chinese restaurant. Can you believe it? Must have a big wok there. I've never been in. So, and then after 12 months at Mickleham, we came to Whittlesea, which was 1955. So, I guess Whittlesea's history from 1955 is of particular interest. So, what I've ended up with is an amalgam of some Whittlesea photos from then on, or in that era, and following up my interest in blacksmithing. Because when I went into Tok's forge, I got that ring of the anvil and the smell of the coke forge, and the heat of the forge, and it stayed with me thereafter. And even when we left Kilmore, we went to Lancefield and had a farm there, and Dad would always still go back to Tok's to get work done. So that started it all off. So we came to Whittlesea and we purchased the old house on Black Flat Road here. It was 106 acres there of river flat country. And Dad started a dairy. There'd been a dairy there in the past, but it had the old pole barn cow bales, and so Dad ripped it all out. And he had Roger Hawke was a young builder in starting. He came along and built the dairy and did the renovations there. And Scotty Coulthard, I didn't know Bernie was going to be here today, but Scotty did the concrete work, so they worked as a bit of a team at that time. So, dairying here in Whittlesea, he was able to maintain a whole milk contract with Melbourne for Melbourne Supply, which meant if you were farming that way, you had to actually produce a contract amount of milk all year. So it didn't matter whether it was autumn, winter, or spring. You still had to supply milk contract to your contract levels. And if you overproduced, then they would separate the milk and produce cream, which would go to the Kilmore Butter Factory, and they'd come in and pick up the cream. And so that was how the sales side of it went, and then the skim milk went to pigs, so we always had pigs as well. So it was a mixed farm. Not long after purchasing the property, the opportunity came to buy what they call the pint pot paddock. The pint pot paddock is the paddock which starts at the St Mary's, includes the area we're on here now. This was all part of our farm, 57 acres, and went right out to the corner of Black Flat Road and Wallam. It was just one paddock, fenced in post and rail fencing, which kept our fires burning for years, would you believe? I wish I would have kept some of that. It was beautiful timber in some of those rails, and probably better kept than burnt, but so be it. So that's how we came to Whittlesea, and I guess I feel I'm a bit fortunate in that I've lived and worked in an era that started with a draft horse and ended up with drones. So it's pretty comprehensive rate of change. When we came to Whittlesea, our first harvest was using the draft horse with a dump rake, and a stationary hay press to make our hay. We made hay wherever we could. In fact, the street down beside the police station here wasn't made at that stage, so Dad went down and we cut the hay and made hay on that little bit to get a few extra bales. And as a matter of fact, I was 8 and I was driving the grey Fergie with a dump brake on it, and the policeman come out and thought I was not really right to be driving on the roadway. Although I was right comfortable about it, so I had to ride the draft horse home. So that's an early recollection of time in Whittlesea. So we progressed from that, and Normie Cornford came in with his hay baler, pulled by a grey Fergie in this great monstrous machine with its magpie going up and down and its Wisconsin engine roaring at the front. And then eventually Rex Cardwell took over the contract, and Thelma would be there with the second grey Fergie with a rake. She'd be raking, and that's how we progressed to the Cardwell regime. And a lot of people think hay carting is hard work. The current bales are 14-inch by 8-inch section, and they're wrapped in twine, but those days they were 2 inches wider each way, and they were wrapped in wire that you couldn't even get your hands under, so they were killers. But anyway, that's our early recollections of our harvest there. Harry Cornford did the raking for Normie, as a matter of fact, and he towed the rake behind his Land Rover. So that was how their team worked. What we were up to broke down, well, if you broke down, there was Bill Gale and his workshop just around here. The backyard was full of old boilers, and it was a fascinating place to go. And then his nephew Alf started in forestry. Alf's father worked in combination with Bill in earlier days, and he passed away, so Alf went out on his own. And there was Claude Rowland's blacksmith shop, which was off Wallen Road. So to get into Claude's blacksmith shop, you came in beside Bert Wales' house, or you came in from the other side. There were 2 vacant blocks, which is where Signwriter. Anyway, either way, you come into this forge, which was under a big old Owens. Correct. Thanks, Ross. Yeah, under a big pine tree there. And so I have members of going to the forge around there and getting work done. Jeff's going around and getting work done there. I later found out, as a matter of interest, that we had another connection. My grandmother used to ride up from Melbourne on her push bike, and she'd visit Claude's wife. So you don't know these connections are there, but it was quite interesting to find that out at a later date. She also had a relation, Carr, which I'll mention later on, which was related to blacksmithing, and he actually worked down at the forge at Mernda at some stage. So, so the photo up here is a fond recollection of Whittlesea. That's Herb Wood's boot shop, and the boot shop here was on the road up to the railway line. So you drop your boots in the morning, head up to the railways, and pick them up when you came home at night. So. Building that unfortunately wasn't kept, but it would have been a nice little scene. So it's an amalgam here of some of the history of the township as we knew it or before, and you've probably got this in your files, no doubt. But when we came to Whittlesea, Martin's store was still working, and Gibbs' store over the road here, and their residence. This is the Commercial Bank of Australia is here, which is now clothing and accessory place there.
Beautifully renovated there.
Yeah. So it's probably one of the few of the old buildings left there now. But then there was Beattie's store was on the corner. It wouldn't have been Beattie's at this stage when the horses were there, but and our school bus would pull up to the side there, and all the kids would go and ride on and so forth. And the National Bank on then was functioning as well. So before I go to that. When we bought our house, which was beside the shop in Forest Street, there was a chook house in the backyard with a lot of rubbish in it, amongst which we found a fruit case, and on investigation found out it was the minutes and the rolls and the robes from the IOOF, and they were in a ordinary sort of estate. But as I went further with my interest in blacksmithing, I went back to that roll and found that it listed all the people that were present in those 1800 period and their employment or otherwise and so forth. But I'll just another. I'll just go through these as they are in the film. This is the Coffee Palace, or the Prince of Wales Hotel on the corner there, and next to it the dining room. This is the bakery, wood-fired bakery, which was Mitchell's. And when we first came here, it was fully in operation, and behind the bakery, right through to Lime Street, was all full of stacked firewood, so that would keep the wood-fired fires burning.
Ian, can I ask you to sit down while you're showing the photos,
sorry.
just so that we can see them more
Sit
clearly?
down.
Thank you very much.
What street was the bakery on?
Is it Walnut
Was
Street?
it on
Yeah.
what
Opposite.
end? So up
Right opposite
Directly
the
opposite.
Gloff Keating.
Yeah.
The what? Gloff Keating, that's the
Community centre.
Centre or something there?
Yeah, and in front of the bakery, as interesting, was a public weighbridge, and that was actually on the roadway. So you could go and get your truck weighed or whatever there if you wanted to. I guess they weighed the flour coming and going and wood and so forth. It's fine. Louis Murray's husband was the baker in Sydney
Yes.
at the time. So this is snap of that roll. It showed you the names, dates, ages and professions of the members from its first meeting in September 21st, 1869. So they go well back, and if you were early in the Whittlesea era and you like the tipple, you've probably got a name in there somewhere as well. In the front of the book is the pledge, which they had to sign to say that they would abstain from drinking alcohol. You can see I've actually left the photocopies of the roll back there, so you can actually read that rather than me try and get it off this screen. It also shows, as you move on in the book, their status, that is how long they've abstained from drinking, the last abstinence, and also their currency, whether they had paid their dues. And there's a lot of there that are waiting payment. Dare I say there are a lot of blacksmiths in here because it was hot and sticky work, so you'd have been pretty fond of a beer. And it also shows their birth dates, so it's pretty useful information, and it gave me a whole lot of feed. So out of that I established a lot of the names of the blacksmiths in Whittlesea itself. In fact, overall, during the period of the research that I did, I think I identified 34 blacksmiths in the City of Whittlesea, and I've actually listed the ones here that are relevant to the local area. So one house back, pretty much opposite where the physio lady is there now. There's a small cottage there. Harry lived in there, and Harry died at age 88 in 1862, and he went to the war as a blacksmith. So he's got quite a history there. This one here ties up where the blacksmiths worked in relation to the forges that we identified. We identified 3 forges in the township of Whittlesea. Whittlesea was at the head of the rail, but is also where the rail was fed from the fruit growers and vegetable growers in Kinglake, and also from the log splitters and wood cutters on the Macedon Range. So it was a fairly major centre at that stage of the piece. I'll deal with these in a little bit more detail as we go along, but Plenty Road, Robert and William White. Now I've seen it spelled W-H-I-T-E as well as W-H-Y-T-E, but I've chosen to use it this way, which I think is probably correct. And John Williams, a bit more detail about him. Walnut Street, Richard Williams, not related to John. McNamee, he employed Harry Hyland, as I've written there. Bill Maxwell, Alex Bayliss. Church Street, Lyons, McLennan, Austin and Bayliss and Claude Rowlands. So you can see they rotated between forges, and in fact often within forges within the district as well, so it's a bit of a moving target. The first of many blacksmiths to join the association back to the IOOF was Henry Ellingsworth. He was initiated on the 25th of June 1870. The aim of the lodge was to be non-judgmental, and also they had to sign that pledge of temperance, which I mentioned. Yes, so an interesting aside to that is that there were one blacksmith in particular who seemed to be a repeat offender. And later when I did some work on looking through cemetery records, I found out that at about that time he'd lost his wife and child. So he probably had another driver that sent him to the bottle. I'm not too sure, but often the background stories you don't get to know or to understand, but that was one interesting one that I came across. So. Yes, as well as there was a tram line, of course, which fed the railways coming down from Kinglake. You're probably aware of that, the wooden tramway that came down roughly along the old Kinglake Road where it is currently the main road. So that was another reason for the activity levels, I think, that were there.
Did that one cross over Forest Street and then to the railway?
I don't know where it was in town. I know it's on the south side of the Kinglake Road. When you come down the hill there, you can still see some of the cuttings going through that area where it had gone. So this gentleman was Mr. Williams, and he's actually his niece is Vera Pittaway, which is how I came across A, the photo, and B, a lot of the information. And that's his forge. Now, this baffled us for a while because I had Williams listed as being in Walnut Street, and it just didn't gel. We sort of could see in the background some areas that definitely wasn't Walnut Street. And after a while, I read Reminiscences of Whittlesea by F.E. Duffy. F.E. Duffy was one of the Duffy ladies, isn't it? And in it she mentions how Williams' forge was pulled down to make way for Dr. Day's surgery. So all this then started to tie together, and you can see in the background the railway houses, and if you look really hard, which identify that we definitely had the right bloke in the right place. So that was the first of the forges, and fantastic photo. I'm very, very lucky to have that. So research went on from there, and we found bits and pieces of information wherever we could. In fact, at our workshop, I had a sign up, wanted information about blacksmiths, and it did yield a few things along the way. John McPhee was one that came to light, and he'd been out at the wash-up of Bert Welton's property out on the Wallen Road. And behind the dairy door was a big bag full of receipts and accounts, amongst which, of course, came to highlight some of the accounts there from the blacksmiths. And here's one here to Bert Welton by Claude Rowlands. I know the dollar's changed a lot, but they're never going to make a fortune, I don't think, when you see the prices they charge for the work. This one here is the second forge, which was in Church Street, next to the post office, on the north side of the post office.
The current post office?
The old post office.
The old post office,
yes. So there was sort of two buildings. This was the main blacksmith shop, and on the north side of it was the wagon shop, because you couldn't have a wagon building, painting, fine work in the same part as where all the forges were operating. So, and that was there. At the back of it was a wood yard run by, I'll get it in a minute, anyway. Yeah, so it's quite a building. So also you'll see in this photo here that he's agent for H.B. Mackay's famous farm implements. So we saw this progression as also of interest and progression of the business that we ultimately ran on Beach Street. So he's obviously the earliest farm machinery dealer in Whittlesea. The Church Street premises was established by Mr. Lyons originally, and then to McLennan, then to Claude Rollins. Claude Rollins I've got dated at 1932, and then to Austin in 1936, and Bayliss later worked with him. So they had a number of owners and progressed through different stages of the economy, and in a lot of ways the demise of blacksmiths was related to the war times. So a lot of them went to war and there was no blacksmiths left, or money changed, business changed completely during those war periods as well. I think Highland was the first one I saw that had gone to the First World War. Most of them gone up to the Second World War, but I guess there's a lot of interaction all the way. Claude also left to go to war. Was said to have used his discharge payment to set up at the rear of his house in Wallen Road that I mentioned. So I don't unfortunately have any photos of that one. There's a pretty ramshackle little building. It was just a little corrugated iron shed and a big pile of scrap metal. So
Where on Wallen Road did you say again?
it's about halfway. I always get mixed up with the street name, between Walnut Street and the next street up. Yeah, so it was about in the middle of it. I think the house might still be there actually.
There's a little house.
Little old house, yes.
Quite a large block.
Yes. The block, well, I guess it didn't run right through to the back because the other two blocks went in behind it, but they just gained access through there.
Yes.
So, yeah. But he was still working when we came here in 1955 and for a couple of years thereafter. And I know that I had discussions with one of the Searles, and they used to get their knives made from him out of carbon steel, and they cut better and work better than anything else. And he'd get a few knives done, and then he'd have enough money to go and buy a few beers. It's a hand-to-mouth feed. Yeah, and then I heard of a photo. This photo here, I heard there was a photo around of the forge in Church Street, and I ended up finding it through the Robinson family, and that I was just very lucky to find that quality photo, and it was after a lot of research and a lot of sort of referrals from different ones. At the time. So I'm just checking back the notes on this one here. It was really the paint shop that was on the south side, a separate building in terms of the forge there. So there's another photo of this one that came out of the Sun in 1936, and I actually was interested by talking to the Lions or Rotary, I can't remember which one it was, one night we did a similar presentation to this. I thought they were the sustenance workers post-war getting work, but I was quickly reminded, no, they were Border Works employees, Melbourne Border Works employees. And interesting, only a couple of weeks ago I had a ring from Norm Cornford. He said he'd heard that I had a photo, and his forebears had been plumbers in Preston, I think he said it was, and then he'd been told they had the contract to put the water main in at Whittlesea. So I don't know whether they put any of it in or none of it in or whatever, but I was well and truly reassured. And when you read the script on this, it says it's Melbourne Water installed in the main, so I can assume that's right. And it was actually a 6-inch fibro cement pipe being laid. And you'll notice if you have a look at the forge picture that it's got a big arch over the top of the horseshoe,
Yes.
which was painted in pink. So pink horseshoe over the door. So that further identified it for some of the descriptions that were there.
I love the fact you can still see the old post office there.
Yes, yeah, it certainly identifies where it is.
It's our picture on our current calendar for
this month, isn't it? That photo?
Yes. This year?
Yeah, this year's.
Yes.
I've got it hanging
Can't
in the kitchen,
remember.
so I'm pretty sure it's that photo.
Yeah.
So, here we go. So I then found, by absolute luck, this photo, which is it was through our workshop there, and my sign and a bit of I had a few shifting spanners I had on my desk there, so people could talk about them, and I got a great collection of those over time too. But a guy called Peter Austin came in, and it turns out that Peter, as his grandfather was Ted Austin, and that was a real quirk of luck. And he went on to give me the photo. This is him working in the Church Street forge. On the left is Ted Austin, and she's a bit of a ramshackle place when you have a look at it, and
Yes.
boards falling off the walls and scrap everywhere. But he said Ted, as so many of the other blacksmiths did, left and went to war, and of 1914. So there's a second connection to the Great War, as they called it.
Is
So
that a
which
child
one?
in the background there?
Oh,
Is that a child there between
There's
the
two.
yes, yes.
Oh, are they two adults, are they?
Yes, I think so. And then in the background?
So is that
Children.
child?
Would it be an apprentice or something?
Well, family members I've often got ranked into pulling the bellows and working them too. So, and some of the discussions I had with Jackie Wales, like they used to go via the forge and spend some time there on their way home from school. They'd pump the bellows and be part of the activity there. So, yeah. This is a photo you're probably familiar with, but I didn't have any photos of the forge in Walnut Street. But if you look down the photo, stand up, point to it. You'll see Mitchell's shop here.
Yeah.
That's the old Royal Mail Hotel before it burnt down. And then in the middle, that's the forge. That's the forge in Walnut Street. And there was another better photo, unfortunately it's not in this lot here, but it has his sign on top of it.
So that would be roughly where the motel
Yes,
units
exactly
are
where the
now.
motel is, yes. So, from the reading that I did, the forge was close to the two-storey building we talked about before, the brick building. And then on the west side of that was another building, which was been a dance hall. So the dance hall was eventually used as a residence for the blacksmith. So Alex Bayliss, I know, lived in there. And Alex Bayliss, he was quite prominent as a blacksmith in the district. His daughter was Betty Wheeler from Mernda. The Baylisses lived in Whittlesea when we came to Whittlesea. So he was certainly active then. You can pick up a little bit more of the blacksmith building there on that photo. Doubled up that one, sorry. So here's Alex Bayliss in his forge. Phyllis Coulthard was very helpful in finding these particular photos. She had these and got them off her, so through her. I think it's a priceless photo, that one. You can see the head of the forge there, and yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, old hand drill press on the wall here. Can't you imagine that dance hall next to the Royal Mail Hotel back in the day? Would have been a lively place. The forge seems to have been established in 1894, but I can't find a definitive date. Then in charge of Thomas Richard Williams, Dick Williams, aged 21 in 1912. Williams sold to McNabee, who employed Harry Hyland, who lived in Walnut Street, one house back from Wallen Road, and Harry left to go to war, which I'd mentioned previously. Effie Duffy, the Duffys lived which is where the bottle shop is at the Royal Mail now. That was their home. It's a little old place melting into the ground, as so many of them did here, being timber homes. Effie Duffy wrote Reminiscences of Whittlesea. I'm not sure whether anybody's read that or has copies, but Effie makes a
Two
reference
copies
to.
in our collection if anybody wants to borrow it.
It's an interesting read, yes. Effie makes reference to her brother Walter, and he was working as a striker at age 25 in 1926 over the back fence, like they were on the other side of the fence from the forge. So that was an interesting connection there. In fact,
Do you know
I
what the
had.
date of that photo is?
Beg your pardon?
Do you know what the date of that photo is?
No, I don't know. It might tie in with something else. I'll have to try and come back to that. I have reminiscence of Duffy's home myself, because we went to the Church of England, and somehow or another I got nominated to go around to Effie Duffy's and learn the catechism. I don't know if anybody's read or heard the catechism, but it was the ultimate religious document in boring great detail. But the little houses, like I had to bob down to get in the doors, you know, so, as were so many of the houses here. In fact, remember Charlie Howe's house, which is on the end of Forest Street? He was only a little man, but it was so tiny, and Charlie had the paddock opposite there. And I didn't mention, but at the end of our farm eventually was Ping's vegetable gardens, market gardens, and Percy was still alive when we came to Whittlesea. So Percy would walk across the paddock and across the two 8-inch or 6-inch planks across the Bruce's Creek through Howell's paddock to go to the shops and back. And I'll get sidetracked here talking about Percy, but Dad and I would be walking down along the flat, and Percy would yell out, so he'd go over there and he'd take you down to the pigsty, which was by the cow bales, and in the pigsty was a copper. He must have boiled up pig feed in there, and he'd lift the lid off the copper and give you some lifesavers so as a treat. So it depended how long it'd been since you'd been there as to how stale the lifesavers were. So fond memories of Percy and our interactions with him there. So I think there was, Mum got confused, and I'm similarly confused whether it was 18 acres and 19 Chinamen or 19 acres and 18 Chinamen, but something to the tune of that. But all of in fact, there's still a lot of the irrigation channels are still there, and Percy explained how they would do the irrigation. They had a device like a sugar scoop, larger of course, with a long handle on it. So the water would run out by a water wheel, came into these channels, ran along the channels into large pools every so often, and they would have this scoop, and they'd put it in the water and swish it over the vegetables. So instead of being just watering cans, that was his description of how they watered the vegetables. And they would go out, the wagons were still there in the shed from when they did the deliveries around the district, and they would go out for days on end doing these deliveries of vegetables around the district, I guess to market as well, and through the train. Maxwell, I mentioned, was one of the Smiths in this forge, and this article here is out of the Whittlesea show catalogue, topically, and it shows the sort of work that he did. It was obviously a sponsor. They got, after all, the local businesses as well, as they do now, are sponsored. So interesting there, showing about the different items in the show as well, the sheep tossing competition and bending race, musical chairs and so on. So I thought it would be of interest.
Would that be the same Maxwell who was south of the cemetery?
No,
Different
no.
Maxwell.
In fact, I eventually contacted his brother who lived in Wangaratta, and I have got a photo of his anvil. He's still got the anvil that Maxwell used, so I can bring it up and show you if he's still got any stamina left at the end of this. I'll see if I can find it. But
Yes.
and he also sent me a photo of his gravesite where he'd done all the ironwork for around the grave as well. So,
Nice.
yeah. Maxwell took over that forge in 1927 and left in 1932, so that'll give you an idea least at that side of it, and that would be after the earlier photo of Baylis, I believe. So, Bill was one of two brothers from Renfrewshire, Scotland, who came in 1922 with £10 arriving in Geelong. The other brother returned to Scotland. In Whittlesea, he bordered with the Blairs, where he met and married Eileen Gladys. There's a connection with the Whittlesea Blair family. His son Bill recalled how he told him that he was striking for his father. She was striking for his father when she was pregnant with him at age 26. She was his striker. His son Bill related how he would spend a couple of hours on the bellows and help holding the heads of wild horses. So there's some connections I found through discussions with the brother. Maxwell became a millwright, building many of Figlin's mills, the Figlin's mills at Alexandra and up through that Marysville country there, and eventually worked for the Box Hill Gasworks to age 70. That's Maxwell's career history, where faced with dismissal at the arrival of natural gas, he resigned, having never been sacked. So that's Maxwell's story. The comment came up again on the difficulty that blacksmiths encountered in getting paid for their hours. Bill recalled how his father would take 1 day per month off to try and collect some money. There was plenty of work, but people in those days were finding it difficult to pay the baker, let alone the blacksmith. The forge was eventually taken over by Alex Baylis, and Betty Wheeler, his daughter, recalled that she came to Whittlesea in 1927, so there's your date. This coincides with the period of Maxwell's tenure in Walnut Street, so Alex worked with Maxwell and eventually took over probably in 1932. So there's your chronology you're looking for there. This is a record of the rental payment that confirms he was the incumbent in 1935. This is Baylis. Paid £8 and 8 shillings, I think it is.
Would that have been for a year? Do you think that seems a lot of money?
£8 and 8 shillings?
Yeah.
Well, it'd be a month rental, I imagine.
Month.
Yeah, I imagine. Alex completed his apprenticeship at Godfrey and Jonas at Diamond Creek, and his reference attests to the commendable way in which he carried himself. That's Baylis here to the left at the Diamond Creek Forge. And here's his reference. This is to certify that the bearer, Mr. Baylis, has been in my employment for the last 3 years as a blacksmith. I've always found him a hard-working, steady fellow. He is a first-class foreman, striker, and anyone requiring his services I can thoroughly recommend. Amazing.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I've just put this comment in here. As many blacksmiths and wheelwrights, they move between the forges in the district and beyond. Alex spent time with Austin in Church Street. One would assume that this would have coincided with the closure of the Walnut Street Forge as work reduced. He later spent time at the Woolert Forge. Many of the other names, often sons of the original smiths, came up in other locations as well around the district. There were forges at virtually every major intersection and every key route or project, like the Yang Yang Reservoir construction. It was noted in I think Bill Payne's book that there was a forge set up at the gate to the Yang Yang Reservoir or around that area. Not to mention the many farms that had their own. I have a set of bellows that I rescued out of a farm of Harry Adams, orchardist of Jingles Road. So they're hanging up in the shed at home. They're pretty homemade, like they were sort of rough sawn hardwood timber in the bellows, and they were just in a shed with didn't have a roof on it, so I picked them up and brought them home. But, I could have brought perhaps something like it as well, but we probably know what they look like. I mean, I brought a few bits of memorabilia. You can look at that after, which I'll explain to you. But most of my memorabilia is big, needs a crane or something to lift. So. I mentioned Woolert, so there's the Woolert Forge. The building's still there. And when I was running out trying to find this and finding out about Williams, I was treated to a walk through the forge, and I found that there's the other side of it. The bellows were still in place.
Oh.
Now the roof was off above it, and so they were just starting to get weathered. So I rescued them as well. So they're in the shed at home. Beautiful set of tub bellows, and you can see the forge, brick forge beside it, and the water cool I've never done how to pronounce that word, but the cast iron bit that goes into the base of the forge. In this case, water cool. So I just had a cycle going round and keeping it cool. And there's my trump card. On the wall of the forge was, I guess it must have been Bayliss's Traveller. Now the Traveller was the device that was measured the outside of a cartwheel, so you knew the distance you had to cut the tyre. And I brought the Traveller here for you to have a look at, and there's two other Travellers there which were off the shelf, hardware type Travellers. So you can see the difference in the handwork of this Traveller, and it's very likely that the Traveller he would have made in his apprenticeship as part of his training. So near and dear to somebody here's heart is Cockerell's Forge at Myrna. Now, this was still there when we came to Whittlesea, and for a number of years after. So its demise was quite a lot.
I can add a little bit, and
Yeah, sure.
I haven't fact-checked this, but a relative, Bob Cockrell, his name was, there's a few Robert Cockrells, but his father was at Swan Hill, but when we all called him, I never met him, but it was always referred to as Uncle George. After he passed away, it had to be demolished straight away because there was concerns that people might get in, not for good reasons, but they didn't want them to get injured or hurt or anything, so they just demolished it straight away. And he told me, I haven't fact-checked this, that the timbers that the salvage they used in building the fire station at Myrna, but I haven't checked the dates. So
Okay. Well, there's always new information comes to light when you start talking about this.
but he said he helped pull it down.
Yeah.
And that was, authorities, I don't know who they were, said that George had died, there was no one there, so they sort of determined it should be pulled down for the safety of people that shouldn't have gone in. Sort of ironic.
So where was it situated?
Corner of, the northwest corner of Bridgie and Plenty Road, Bridgie Road and Plenty.
Okay.
We used to call it Bridgie Lane,
Yes.
but Bridgie Lane and Plenty Road.
Yeah, but it was still there.
Yes.
And I remember it as a boy because I know Lindsay told me he'd been to it. Is that right, Lindsay?
We're certainly there when we've been.
But we used to go past it to go to my uncle's farm in Deep Creek Road.
It's now part of, it would be on the road now.
Beg your pardon?
It'd be part of the roadway now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they widened it out there, it's where the forge was. Yeah, basically you can see there's shingle roof and, wonderful photograph that.
I know of 3 photos.
Do you?
Yours, because you sent it to me.
Yes.
One in Faye Thomas's collection, it's a beaut.
Yeah.
And one that was in Payne's book, and a really good copy of that turned up. Some chap come out, he had some really good photos of Myrna through having access to some photographers' negatives of some sort.
Yeah, well, there were virtually every major intersection had a blacksmith's forge. There was one behind the Doreen store. In fact, you could still see an impression in the ground where the quench, the hole was where they kept the water to quench the tyres. Because when they fitted the tyres, you have a large tiring plant, which is one of my collectibles. And so you put the wooden wheel on it, you heated the whole tyre up with a fire all the way around it, you dropped it over the top of the wooden wheel, and then you quenched it down with water. And the tyres, in the summer period, the wooden wheels would shrink from the heat, and the tyres would become loose, so they'd cut the tyres and then put them in a tyre shrinker, which I've got another one of those where it's got a big handle and it just squeezes it together and reduces the diameter of the tyre before they refit it. So that was part of the process, but you probably could still see the depression in the ground behind the old store there from where the forge was.
An interesting aspect of that photo is the coal. I think it's coal at the front there, just in front of the fence.
Maybe.
Coal.
Maybe it might be road gravel too.
Okay.
I think they'd have had it closer to the forge.
Yeah. Might have been dropped off there.
Yeah, maybe.
And if I could just add one thing, in the Cockerells, and I said to you before, John's father, who originally came from England first settled at Sorrento and then Hobart Town, he worked at Mill Park as a blacksmith.
Yep.
Then there was John. Then John's brother George, not the George I noted on your list, was a blacksmith, but I think working in Whittlesea. I don't think he had a business. And then Robert was another brother was at Yea, all this same time period. Then a half brother it's Richard and Charles. I can't remember which one was in which. One was at Jamison, and then one was at A1 Mine Settlement. So I think they all set up during the gold rush.
And often, they would do their training and then they'd become a journeyman, so they would go and work in various different forges to gain experience as well. So you see these names recurring in a number of places. There were other, I'll probably come across it, there's
That's Uncle George.
George shoeing a horse at Fenwick Stud, or
Yes.
Fenwick Stud.
That's what he was known in as a family, Uncle George. He was going to live to 100, I think he made 90.
So this is, I'm diverging a little bit, I'll probably go back onto what you're talking about, but this is Top Mar at Kilmore. I guess when I was doing this research, Top was 98, I think he was. And so I went over there and visited and interviewed him. I've actually got it on one of those micro tapes. I'd like to convert it to something more digital, but fascinating discussion with him on that day. And I think I've jumped a couple of pages here, but Top was renowned for his horseshoeing. Because it was a racing town, he was renowned for doing specially weighted shoes where they were heavier on one side than the other, or special for medical reasons. They had different shoes made for them. And I sort of tried to excite some of the general family stories out of them, but he came there as an apprentice blacksmith to people who had the forge in, got lost here somewhere. Here it is, Top Mar. Yeah, it was his 98th year, and I tried to get a bit of a feel for what the life of a blacksmith was, more rather than just where he was and what he did. But he started as a forge that was started there by Strays, who had a big blacksmith shop in Broadford, and in fact, one of the Strays now runs the farm, the farm show in Broadford. Seymour, sorry, in Seymour. Yeah.
Seymour Expo.
So he's actually the organiser of that show in Seymour. But anyway, he started talking to me. He talked to me about how the tyres came loose and they refitted them, and he said that with 2 kilns working, they could do up to 15 sets a day. That's in busy times, so that's really worked, isn't it?
That is.
They could make up to 6 sets of shoes per hour with a striker. They drew down ploughshares, repointed harrows, which he didn't like doing because it was so repetitive, and shod bullocks, which required 2-piece shoes to suit their cloven feet. There were 3 working in the shop: a wheelwright, a floorman, and a blacksmith. He related how he would get a prospective new smith to make a step iron. The or 3-level steel step used to climb on aboard a cart. This would reveal just how capable he was, as it employed every skill in the smith that Smith could be expected to employ. And he said it'll quickly sort out the talkers from the tradesmen. Then he related how, as an apprentice, his master gave him his first shoeing job to complete on his own. A lady would come in from Willowmaven, leave the horse to be shod while she spent her time in town, and when she returned to drive home, he would have kept a brick by the forge fire. He'd wrap it in a bag and set it on the floor of her gig to keep her feet warm. It was her horse he shod, and proudly advised her of his achievement. When he returned, she immediately berated the blacksmith for allowing the young Tock to do her work, and he was devastated. Tock said with his wrinkled smile, there was no warm brick for the gig that day, and I expect from then on. Tock worked until he was 75, renowned for his talent in making specialty shoes for the racing industry, and was in constant demand. So it was a fascinating story, and his wife was there too, and I tried to elicit some stories about what she thought of being a blacksmith's wife at the time, and she was very, very curt and didn't add anything to the conversation. So, in terms of moving around, we were able to pick up a bit of information about Austin. You can see here, Austin at this stage is at Springvale. And you're doing work for people here in Burwood, Hawthorne. Then he's in Whittlesea, but he's crossed out Greensborough, so he must have had a forge in Greensborough for a while. And that's to Whelpton, that invoice, so that's how that came to life, in that bag of stuff behind the dairy door. It's 6 shillings to repair the fork handle. Then 210 Burwood Road, so you can see here the sort of where the basic letterhead's the same, but he just keeps changing location. And this one here, I'll just go back on that, here it's crossed out again in Heathcote, so he must have been in Heathcote as well, so he's a mover and shaker. And it's this invoice is here by him to Heathcote Shire Council and the Forest Office at Heathcote. So the blacksmiths were really an integral part of maintaining all sort of commercial activity in town, whether it was the Melbourne Board of Works here or whether it was, as I say, the Forest Office here at Heathcote. Back in Whittlesea in July 1935, he's doing work for Bert Bolton. And this is fascinating because here he's gone into the auto industry.
Suddenly a car instead of a car.
Anybody take a guess as to what that car is?
Plymouth.
Unlikely. It's a Maxwell. So, just to pick up some other local names that he would have worked for, Percy Gibson. Gibson lived out along the aqueduct and is a forebear of the Mason family. So there's plenty of Masons in town. That was grandfather Gibson. P.W. Clark, whose farm was on top of the hill here and ran down to Clark's Road, or not Clark's Road, Glenburnie Road.
No, it is Clark's Road, that short stretch.
No,
is
Clark's is further on. No, I mean their place just went to not Glenburnie.
To Glenburnie.
Yeah, anyway, where the White Haven is. That was all part of the Clark's place, and it went right up to the top of the hill. And invoicing here to Melbourne Board of Works. Whelpton again. Some of those repeating themselves, I'm sorry. So then, I came across an invoice here which was talked about other time that I'll pass on that. We also identified his source of supply. And yeah, so maybe that was next one. So this one here was an invoice for dentistry buildings, porcelain cement fillings and gold inlays. What the hell's going on here? We're not really entirely sure, but we're pretty sure like he did horse dentistry. But I thought a gold inlay is probably a bit good for a horse, but that's what I was reassured of, probably dentistry for horses, which often apparently some of the blacksmiths did. So this is Wales and McKendrick, which is where the old building was, the current one. They were the Ford agents, you can see there on the photograph, and the main automotive place in town, I suppose, it would have been T-Model Gauge and on when they were there. That's replaced by the new garage at the top, and then by the newer garage at the bottom.
Is that where Luscombe is now?
Luscome's there now,
Yes.
correct, yes. Well, there was Luscome's before that was replaced by the steel steel wheeling below there. And Wales, of course, ran the bus line for the schools, so they did all the school pickups and an old jail bar Ford truck, bus that used to go around. So just an aside from that too, I'll just go back in. Wales and McKendrick broke up. They parted company, and McKendrick opened up round in Church Street, which is about where the Chinese restaurant's yard is. So not Chinese, the noodle restaurant.
Yes.
There next to that, that was a garage with curbside pumps on the road, on the footpath when we came to Whittlesea. So I recommend good recollections of Lindsay's garage. Eventually became. But when McKendrick went round there, he got a GMH or a General Motors franchise. So he went in opposition to Wales's with their Fords, and then of course old mate down the road got the Maxwell car. So it was a place to go to buy a car in the era. Plenty of competition. So I mentioned Bill Gale earlier was the repairer of choice when we came to Whittlesea, and I'll deal with that a little bit later on. But originally there were the Gale brothers. The Gale brothers were contractors. So this shows them with their steam engine doing a big haulage job there. They did road contracting for the City of Whittlesea, or the Whittlesea Shire as it would have been at the time, and this shows their crushing plant. So they would take their steam engine round with a crushing plant, crush road gravel, and then you can see the age there at 1927, you were looking for dates before. And they also did chaff cutting, so this is showing you a chaff cutting operation there off the same steam engine. So they were busy boys, and a lot of these engines would have been what were in their backyard eventually, which is all covered with houses, of course, now. But I do recall going into Bill's yard, and Bill was a bit of a machinery agent. He had the Crump fertiliser spreader agency, and we bought one off him at the time. But you drive into his yard, and where I showed before those big piles of scrap out the front of the shed, Bill had a little timber office, probably about 10 feet square, and you drive in there and Bill would be always leaning on there smoking and not doing very much, but he always greet you at the door there when you turned up in the yard. So there, that was his workshop opposite where his office was.
Yes, my first paid job.
First paycheck.
First paid job.
Oh, was it really?
Saturday mornings.
Okay.
Sweeping the dirt floor.
Plenty of dirt there too. So this is a bill from Bill Gale to my father. One of his problems was that Bill wasn't too regular with his bookwork, and so I remember getting Dad getting a bill for about 6 months worth of work, which was you couldn't almost jump over, and he had a big fallout with Bill after that for not being open about his accounts and doing them on time. But often his bills, as you can see, there's a little bit of it here, but his bills included a picture, hand-drawn picture of what it was that he did. So it might be a bracket, and you'd have a picture of the bracket drawn on the account. He also spelled her name wrong, but we always get two D's instead of one, that's all right.
I love the stamp duty stamp.
Yes, true. Yeah, good pick up. Yeah. Phil Bolgaster. Eight pence. Yeah. Amazing, isn't it? Anyway, so that was Bill. And then Alf started up around in Forest Street with Whittlesea Farm Supplies. This is the forerunner of our business, I suppose, particularly when I left school at year 10, didn't know what I was going to do, but a couple of the boys, Peter Belharry and Jim Clark, had been to RMIT and done farm management and maintenance course, 12-month course. The first, they were 3-term years. Anyway, the first semesters were in RMIT. A fantastic course. We did everything, every trade. You did electrical, plumbing, building, fitting, machining, motor mechanics, wool classing, and business management, and welding and blacksmithing. And that's where I really got fired up about the blacksmithing. But, it was amazing. I really loved it. So I turned 20 and my marble didn't get pulled out of the bag for being called up to the army. So I said, I've got 2 years now, what'll I do? So I went back to RMIT and did welding, and I went right through the welding process and then onto hire technicians, and I just got fascinated with the theory of it as well as the practical, and gained some qualifications at the same time. But Alf had been there for 25 years and it closed down. All bar, he'd still get a few parts in for New Holland balers and stuff and open up if you needed it. So, but this shows a mobile school. Now, when we were in business, you had to send all your tradesmen to Sydney and wherever they had the schools, which cost enormous amounts of money and lost time. But here they are with a travelling school, going to the dealerships and training the dealers in how to fix machinery. And on the right there is actually Peter Johnson, who was working there with Alf at the time. Philip Rowe also worked with Alf for a while, so there was a few locals that took up extra employment with him at the time. Alf's business was quite mixed. Whittlesea Farm Supplies, he traded. You can see he's got New Holland at the top there, Rover cars, Land Rover, Fair tractors, Alfa Laval, and dairy equipment, because it was a dairying district when we came to Whittlesea. Most of the, or a big percentage of the farms were running dairies for Holman. He was also the Ampol agent, so he did bulk fuel deliveries, so he was a very, very busy guy. When we came to Whittlesea, incidentally, Dad started the dairy, but he also took up the local representative for Quiney Morby, who were the agents for the market at Mernda. And he was a fuel agent because of the interaction with Kilmore. He started the bulk fuel agency for Mobil. And so he'd go out in a little Anglia ute with 2 44-gallon drums of fuel in the back and a piece of 4x3 holding them in there. And we went up those little tracks and all around the district. There's his phone number there, 15156. Our phone number was 56. Maybe that's it, is it? So when I left school and I did the welding course, I went to Western Australia and Darwin and worked for a while to get some experience. Came back and Alfred closed the business down and I purchased it and the house next door. And so the business started, and that was 1972. I started mainly with a focus on welding, but I took over the New Holland agency as well. And Alf was very good. He gave me some crash course in baler repairs and was available to help me over the phone if I had a problem. And I said to Mum, look, can you mind the phone because I've got to go out and do a job. So she'd sit there and there'd be a couple of gates in the corner you can sell if you want to and just take any phone calls, and that's how we started. And then a year later, Robin and I got married and she she took over the books and also ran the spare parts department. She'd never even seen a baler in her life before, but she managed to interpret the needs of farmers when they came in, and on it went from there. So eventually we sold out in 2011, I think. We had 3 branches and 45 staff. It was an interesting journey. Some of whom are here today. Yeah, Ross was a good player in our game along the way as well. So, that's a bit of our history and the history of the Blacksmiths, and